this computer.
Okay, today's question is, what does our dinner plate have to do with climate change? And to start this podcast, we thought we'd read a little bit from Drawdown, the section entitled Food. Think of the causes of global warming, and fossil fuel energy probably comes to mind. How true. Less conspicuous are the consequences of breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The food system is elaborate and complex. Its requirements and impacts are extraordinary. Fossil fuels power tractors, fishing vessels, transport, processing, chemicals, packaging materials, refrigeration, supermarkets, and kitchens. Chemical fertilizers atomize into the air, forming the powerful greenhouse gas nitrous oxide. Our passion for meat involves over 60 billion land animals that require nearly half of all agricultural land for food and pasture. Livestock emissions, including carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, and methane, are responsible for an estimated 18 to 20% of greenhouse gases annually, a source second only to fossil fuels. If you add livestock, all other food-related emissions, from farming to deforestation to food waste, what we eat turns out to be the number one cause for global warming. So this section that we're going to talk about talks about all the different things that the food.
I'm just going to stop you because you're closing the book and the pen. That's going to be background noise. So just say it again. So you were saying this is going to be the background.
So this section that we're talking about in Drawdown is about food. It's about, I don't know, 6 or 8 chapters long. Maybe it's a little bit longer than that. And we're going to be talking about a couple today. We're going to be talking about plant-based foods, or a plant-rich diet, and then reduced food waste, and maybe composting as well. So I found it really interesting because, yes, I think it's so true. When you think about global heating, you think of the transportation industry or the fossil fuel industry, obviously cars and air transport. But then you think about home heating and all that kind of thing. And it seems like, okay, that can we address that? But if we look at our dinner plate, I mean, that's something we can all do, is take a step in the right direction for helping to eliminate deforestation, for regenerative farming. There's all kinds of things.
And I really like this topic as a way to bring individual action home. And we've talked about before, I mean, it isn't, oops, I heard you swallow. It isn't, individual action. This is not in personal actions. Making change is part of the bigger puzzle. It's a collective issue. But the fact that we eat 3 times a day, we go grocery shopping, if you're like me, way more often than you should. Seems like I'm there at least once a day, which is ridiculous. And
that is crazy.
That's crazy. No, well, I have to say I haven't been there for about 4 days, but every now and then it's like I look at the checkout clerk, who of course I know because this is a small town, and I'm like, yes, I am back again today, sort of thing. So anyways, it's something that we can all do. And we have a garden, and it's producing a whole lot of stuff right now. Why I spend so much time at the local IGA, I can't tell you, but I do. So I think it's a really great topic. I just want to have a little bit of a pause and just introduce. So we talked about Drawdown. We should probably say that it's edited by Paul Hawken. The most comprehensive, it's called entitled Drawdown, the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming. And Rose and I are very excited about the book, and we've talked about a couple of, have you talked about one chapter before, just the girls and
Talked
women?
about the girls and women,
Okay.
which was actually 2 chapters, but it was one section.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and in fact, this section on food has, I think, 14.
Oh, so much more than, I was thinking 6 or 8.
And then there's an essay by Michael Pollan, and then another one looking at the roots of grassland. But there's a lot of ground covered, and I think let's talk about plant-rich diets and farmland. Was it farmland restoration? No.
Nope.
Those were the top.
Reduced food waste.
Reduced food waste. And do you have the numbers from Project Drawdown where those rate?
Well, reduced food waste is number 3.
Wow. And so parse that out for us. What does number 3 mean?
Number 3 means it's the number 3 thing that we could do to draw down. So it would reduce, if we can reduce our food waste, we could reduce 70.53 gigatons of CO2.
So it's a huge solution. It's number 3 out of 100.
Out of 100. And actually, plant-rich diet is number 4.
Wow.
That would be another 66.11 gigatons.
Wow.
Which I don't even know what that looks like.
No. No. That's beyond my kind of ability to visualize. But just the fact that we're talking about number 3 and number 4 globally, shifts that can happen to make a difference on climate change. And so what did you want to talk about what Drawdown says about that, or do you want to talk about your interpretation? Like how?
Well, the plant-rich diet. So I'm not a vegetarian. Are you? Or vegan or?
I am definitely not a vegan, and we probably eat meat maybe 4 times a month. So
okay.
my husband is definitely not a vegetarian, but he mostly eats what I put in front of him. We also in the
lucky
summer,
him.
Yeah, I think so. Oh, I had a really delicious zucchini enchilada dish for supper, I have to say. Sure don't miss meat in that. But we do eat, because we live on a lake and we can go fishing, so we do catch local fish. So I don't count that as meat because there's a low carbon footprint. But we don't have that more than a couple of times a month as well. And we do actually have some venison in our freezer that a friend gave us that he hunted. And so we try and eat as local as possible when we do eat meat, but we don't eat a lot of meat, and because of climate change and because of health reasons.
So your husband's a doctor, and so is a lot of it because of health, because that's very intricately tied to if we can reduce our not only if we eat less meat, it doesn't only reduce our carbon footprint, but it does all kinds of things for our health. And so that reduces, makes people live longer, but it also reduces healthcare costs, and then those monies can be put towards other things. And so it makes a healthier society in general.
There's so many reasons to cut down on meat. We actually stopped eating red meat way back. I'm trying to think, how young were my girls? Probably 20 years ago. I don't know if you remember the mad cow scare. I don't know. Yeah. So
my husband was traveling. My husband was traveling to England at the time, and he was completely freaked out. Yeah.
So that was a good reason not to eat red meat. So we stopped eating beef then. So that's been 20 years. And pork, since I read a book called the biography of Christopher Hogwood, which is about a pig, but it's a true story. And after that, I thought, I cannot eat another pig, having read that book.
So now you limit yourself to just chicken,
yes,
or venison.
Yeah. Or
Buffalo, or
locally, there aren't any buffalo roaming on our prairies anymore. But if there were, that would be local. So there's, I guess, moose meat as well, although we don't have any in our freezer. But that would qualify as local. But yeah,
Mhm.
so you don't eat, have you considered eating vegetarian? Our daughters are both vegetarian as well and have been for
I got to
15.
say, I do love red meat. So, but I'm not a fan of chicken or pork.
Oh,
So,
interesting.
so when I do eat, I mean, for years I tried to do the chicken thing because, again, I do like turkey though. But chicken just, maybe it's just how I cook it. It just comes out, it's just too dry for me. Um, so if I'm going to eat meat, it is going to be beef. But that kind of that limits the amount of meat that I eat because I don't eat pork and chicken most of the time. Um, and I'm really getting more into fish. But I do like a good roast beef sandwich occasionally. So I know that's not very PC to say, especially on a podcast about about
Well,
climate change, but it's the
I mean,
truth.
we're supposed to, I don't think it's about pretending that we're something that we're not.
No,
So um, I think it's a good conversation to have. And so have you embraced the idea of meatless Mondays? Have you?
I have embraced the idea of meatless Mondays. I think I said to you in an earlier podcast that I'm really working on growing a lot of my own food this year, and so I've been when you're eating eggplant or there's something about the texture of eggplant that is very similar to meat to me, or mushrooms. I mean, I need that. It's a tactile thing. I don't know what it is. Um, so I find that I can augment my diet with those kinds of vegetables. I can't do just salads. I've got to have something that's sticks to my ribs, kind of. Um, but certainly eggplant and mushrooms kind of fill that void. So I'm trying to do. I do a lot of eggs. So I guess that is kind of chicken,
A different,
a different take on chicken.
yes.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and I do. I'm not a big dairy person. I'm not a big milk person. I never have been, but I do like cheese. So
Well, and so here we're talking about choices. And so do you consider the climate impact of your diet?
more and more, more
Mm-hmm.
and more, I do.
Mm-hmm.
I was we were out for lunch one day. I was visiting my son at UCSD, and we went to this little greens place, and everything in there is organic. But their special of the day was lamb. And I said, "Oh, I think I'm going to get the lamb." And my son was aghast. He's like, "Mom, that's the worst thing for a carbon footprint."
Is
And
it?
that's what he said. That's what he said.
I think
They,
beef
they
is.
were out of it by the time I got to the cashier.
I
In
thought,
California, they were out of it. So I'm not alone in my meat loving,
no,
whatever.
I thought, let's look this up and put it up on our website after. I think beef has a
Is
big.
more so than lamb. Okay. Well, maybe his objection was more that it was those cute little furry animals. He didn't want me eating them. I don't know.
I remember years ago when we were traveling in New Zealand, this really was a tourist souvenir. It was early days for the tourism industry in the 80s in New Zealand, and they actually had a little baby sheep, a lamb's head on a plaque, and they were painted different pastel colors like light blue, light pink. I don't know how they were dyed. And then it said, "This baby lamb died, in a snowstorm on the mountains. Won't you take him or her, I can't remember, home to your nice warm
Oh,
country?"
oh,
So
oh. Yeah.
that's a little aside,
Yeah.
but definitely if you live in New Zealand, I would say lamb has the lowest carbon footprint because we've got more sheep, way more sheep than
People.
people.
Yep.
Yes. So you were going to say?
So I was going to say that I found it interesting in doing the research for this podcast that that beef, if cattle were their own nation, they would be the world's third largest emitter of greenhouse gas.
Wow.
That's pretty crazy. And then thinking about, what happens. So farmers that want to have cattle, we're seeing it happen in the Amazon right now, right? They're burning down the deforestation so that they can have more cattle. So cattle have more land to graze in order to meet the supply for the, or order to meet the demand for European beef. So, I think more and more, I'm looking at everything that I can do to help.
Have you tried any of those burgers that I think Burger King and is it Arby's? I know A&W has that are Beyond Meat.
I have not.
My brother,
Go
my
ahead.
brother is an environmentalist as well. He runs an IT company that looks at reducing waste. They work with the EPA and a number of states and provinces, but he's very excited about Beyond Meat. And in fact, he brought some Beyond Meat burgers to a family barbecue this summer. Now, my daughter and I were there, and I have to confess, I wasn't tempted either, and neither was my daughter, who's been vegetarian for at least 15 years, because she actually said, if I wanted to have like runny juice and like, I don't need a burger that pretends to be meat to be satisfied. But it really, the others who ate it gave it pretty positive reviews.
But you didn't try it yourself.
I am not into genetically modified food.
Yeah, no. So that's kind of my thing too. Although, I do love a good garden burger. I mean, I've gone many times for barbecue. No, I know. But what I'm saying is a garden burger satisfies my hunger for a burger. So I don't really want to be eating something that's genetically modified.
Yeah.
But again, my environmental engineer son says, well, Mom, that's what we need to do in order to be able to feed all of the people in the world, which I'm like, that's going to be part of our discussion here. No, that's not true.
Right. But genetic modification, that is not eating meatless or Beyond Meat burgers.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's certainly an argument that one hears a lot, that's the agro-industry wants us to believe that we need genetically modified food, but that is not what Drawdown says.
No, not at all. And so I guess that's a little bit, we're speeding ahead, but to the next topic, food waste. So 40% of the food that is grown never makes it to the fork, to the table. 40% of the food. And yet there's something like 800 million people that are hungry. So that's just craziness. All that food that's going to waste is some of it's rotting in the fields. When I was writing my blog earlier in the year, Lyceum Live, I got in touch with this guy who works at a place called Uproots along the foothills of the Rockies in Colorado, outside of Denver. And he was aghast at all the people that were going hungry in that area, and seeing how, the migrants would come in and pick as quickly, they're working, as quickly as they can, but how much food was left behind. And so he has started a nonprofit where he has volunteers come in and go through those fields after they've been picked for commercial harvest. And they come by and pick literally bushels and bushels and bushels of fresh produce and bring it to the food pantries in the Denver area. So really great organization. And otherwise that stuff is just rotting out there. And so rotting adds to the methane, and methane is like something like 28%, 28 times more caustic or more toxic
Powerful.
more powerful. Thank you. More powerful than CO2.
And I like that example because it shows what a difference one person can make in a very local area.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there are, if you look around, the States and Canada and around the world, that there are individuals like that taking action to make a difference in their local community in food waste. And
well, there's a couple of new organizations here in the States. They're actually online, so maybe you can get them up in Canada as well. But they have, like, when you go to your grocery store, they're only putting out the prettiest produce.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that are unblemished, the carrots that are a certain length and all uniform and all that kind of stuff. What happens to all the funky looking stuff?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a couple of different organizations. I can add those names in the link. I didn't think about that ahead of time, but
Mm-hmm.
that you can actually purchase the produce from them, and they'll ship them to your house, right? And it's all kind of like malformed stuff. I mean, so
Yeah.
you get some funny looking, things that look like they have legs on them, and that
They'll
are.
actually ship them. I wonder what the carbon footprint of that is.
Yeah, I don't know that. I don't know, but it is reducing food waste. So maybe it offsets. I don't know.
I'm not sure, but you know what I was reminded of while we were talking is that I've mentioned, I think, to you, I don't know if I've mentioned on the podcast, that one of my new favorite podcast is called Solvable, and it's uh, Malcolm Gladwell
Oh,
is
yes, you did mention
involved.
that. Yep.
And I just pulled up season 1, episode 4, which is Food Waste is Solvable. And in it, they talk to activist and author Tristram Stewart about using food scraps to eliminate waste. And there's a link to a video called The Ugly Carrot on Vimeo. And so we'll put the link both to that episode of Solvable and to the Ugly Carrot video, because it's very appropriate to what we're discussing today.
Well, one thing I think I mentioned this before too is that in growing my own food this year, and it's definitely touch and go and mistakes and learning experience, right? But all of life is an experiment, or there's really no failing. We're just trying to figure it out. What I love is that everything that I've grown, none of it's gone to waste. Right. I can go to the grocery store and buy tomatoes because I don't like to go every day or every 4 days like you do. I like to go like every 2 weeks.
I just want to point out I either walk or ride my bike because it's only.
Or take your electric car.
It's only a kilometer away from me.
But out of sheer laziness, I like to I want to do all my shopping in one fell swoop. And so if I buy blueberries or raspberries or whatever, I might buy more than I can possibly consume in that short amount of time. And then I open them to eat them and they're mildewy or whatever. And it's the same thing with spinach. It's the same thing. Anything that's very tender goes really fast. But growing it in my own yard, I just go out and pick just what I'm going to use in my cereal that morning for blueberries, or just what I want for tomatoes that night for caprese, and it makes I don't know. It makes me feel like I'm doing my part.
Yeah, and I think that feeds your soul as well as your stomach. That
it does. It does. The other thing that I thought was really interesting is that there's another gal that I've kind of had some conversation with recently, and she has a company that she started. I think, again, it's a nonprofit. It's called Climate Victory Gardens. It's part of part of Green America, and we're kind of on Facebook. We've been having some conversations back and forth. But I looked up victory gardens because my parents were of the World War II generation. So in 1944, there were 20 million victory gardens in the US that produced 8 million tons of fruits and vegetables. And that accounted for 40% of all the fresh produce that people ate.
Just want to stop you. My phone is ringing in the background. That I'll need to edit that out. So
Oh,
just,
can't hear that. Couldn't hear it.
but it will be picked up.
Okay. You have really good ears.
Do I? I'm not sure. I mean, it's in my background, but there. Sorry. So you're saying, repeat that. Not just that they produced how many?
They produced 8 million tons of fresh fruit and produce during those World War II years, because they were incented to do it, right? Um, can't we be incented to do this?
Incentivized.
Incentivized. Okay. Can't we be incentivized to do the same thing now?
Well, it sounds like this person, is it a young woman that you're talking with,
Mm-hmm.
or that's what she's thinking. Climate victory gardens. I love that.
Climate Victory Gardens. I thought the name was just like, because I knew Victory Gardens, and then when it's very catchy, and yeah. So she's somebody that I'm talking to about maybe being on the podcast. So it'd be lovely to talk to her and see what her journey was and
absolutely
she got to that place. But there is something about growing your own food and being responsible for yourself. Growing, obviously, you want to be eating as local as you can. There's nothing more local than just walking out your front door.
Well, and we should probably talk about community gardens too, because we have a few in my community, and you may or may not be aware of the community gardens in your community. I'd be surprised if there weren't. There are. We spend time on the West Coast as well, on Vancouver Island, and there's certainly community gardens in Victoria.
Well, it's interesting because we walk. I'm a huge Red Sox fan. Go Sox! Even though they're horrible this year. And so we go in maybe 10 times a year to the games, and we walk through this area of Boston that's called the Fens, and there are huge community gardens there that are divided up into little plots. Everybody has kind of like their own yard, and some of them are flowers and whatever. Some of them are just incredible. And we walk through there just to see the gardens, and they're all people that live in high rises or whatever downtown Boston, but they're growing their own things.
No, it brings people together.
It's such a sense of community. Yeah. We were there one Sunday afternoon, and there were two people across like the little aisle from each other, and I was commenting on to this one woman about the perennials and stuff that she had, and she was showing me how she had grapes mixed in, and she had vegetables and flowers all kind of growing next to each other. And the gentleman across the way, they had both been there for more than 15 years, and they knew they knew each other's kids. They didn't live in close proximity to each other, but they gardened together.
Yeah. No, and so that's another really good example of, increasing your diet, the plants that you eat in your diet. If you're gardening, you will eat more, as witnessed by, we can post on our podcast page. My daughter gave me 2 humongous zucchini yesterday. And that's okay, because yesterday I made zucchini ravioli, which was delicious. Today I made zucchini enchiladas. Basically, you just need something to put the filling in, and I've grated a whole bunch of the rest of it because I have a really good, so I tend to eat low carb. That's what I do. And so I have a really good low carb zucchini chocolate cake recipe.
Whoa, I might need to have that.
Okay. So we'll post that on the podcast website page, because it is really good. In fact, I'm making it tomorrow. And what else? Oh, and I also have, you probably won't want this recipe, but it's a zucchini pizza crust recipe that uses 2 cups of grated zucchini, and then just like about 3 tablespoons coconut flour. If you've ever cooked with coconut flour, you'll know it soaks up a lot of liquid and it can be really dry. But when you combine it with zucchini, which is very wet, it's perfect.
Mhm.
So anyways, I'm grating all of that, putting it in 2 cups portions and putting it in my freezer. So where was I going? Oh, yes, plant-rich diet tied to gardening, whether it's in your own backyard or in your community garden.
Mhm.
And it brings people together, and it's just a way. I think it's a really good symbol of how the changes that we need to make to deal with climate change are actually, in so many ways, more better for us as a society, better for us even individually, because we all need to be connected to our neighbors. Was it Mother Teresa that talked about the disease of loneliness in North American culture
Mhm.
being one of the worst things? So yeah, it's not all bad news, folks.
No, it's not all good, all bad news. So that brings us to some good news for this week.
Yes.
So I was beyond excited to see that New York City has given New York City Public Schools has given all of their students permission to attend the climate strike on Friday.
I should just say that
September
September.
20th.
Yeah.
September 20th, yeah. Which is amazing. I mean, it seems like that's what it's going to take to how many other school systems will step up behind that? I don't know. And then Amazon, 900 workers from Amazon tonight announced that they were going to be part of the strike, and some another 1,000 from Facebook. I might have those numbers reversed. Announced that they were going to be part of it as well, and Google. Um, the American Architectural Association has come out and said that they, as an association, support the climate strike on Friday.
Wow.
How many more professions will do that? I mean, that's what we need, right? We are all in this together, and
Hmm.
that's and that kind of thing does foster community.
Hmm. And you were going to travel to Boston, you were saying, by transit.
Yeah, we'll drive part way up until unfortunately Boston's so old that we just don't have, well, we're typical of US infrastructure lacking in reaching the far. We're about an hour and a half from Boston, so we have to drive probably 45 minutes north to get to the nearest public transportation, but we'll do that and go into the city. And the climate strike is they rally at I think 10:30 on Friday, and then we'll march to the State House, and there'll be some other things that are going on there. I'm not sure. It's all organized by the kids.
That's great.
So yeah, it's been very interesting to be on the website because a lot of adults are very frustrated that the information is not coming fast enough. And it's like, it's kids doing it,
Yeah.
you just got to kind of chill out and just wait for them to tell you where to show up. So I'm very excited to be a part of that.
Hmm.
And I'm hoping, it looks like 1,700 locations globally are going to be striking on Friday.
Okay, so that's connected to the good news, and why don't we tie it into our action step?
Okay.
Were we going to? We were going to do meatless Mondays. I can't remember.
Yeah, we were talked about,
Okay.
can we reduce, can you look at your plate and say, today I'm not gonna eat meat. I love meat and I can do it. So if I can do it, you can do it.
And it's good to remember to circle Mondays as a reminder. You can do it any day of the week.
Mhm.
Um, and of course, some of our listeners may well already be vegetarians or vegan, and we want to salute you. And every day is Meatless Monday for you, so
Yep.
that's good.
Yep. Good for you.
And I would add too, if you listen to this on Friday the 20th, that between September 20th and September 27th, there is going to be a lot of climate action events going on. So find out what's happening in your own community and see if you can participate, especially to support the kids. If you're an adult, I think it's important for us to show them that they are not alone in this.
Absolutely.
And the sanity tip is, if you're a journaler, pick up your journal when you're feeling really stressed about this situation, and just get it out on paper. And even if you're not a journaler, you might want to grab an old scribbler or even some scrap piece of paper, and just write out your feelings. And in fact, you might even, if you want to, write a letter to your grandchildren or future grandchildren, telling them what you did in this time of a climate emergency.
Yeah, I think that's great. And scribbler, that's got to be a Canadian term. Never heard that before.
Interesting. Notebook. If you're not
Notebook.
Canadian, I will translate. It means notebook.
But I love that idea of writing a letter to your grandkids, because I think neither one of us are grandparents. I know we've said that before yet. But I do think about, will my grandchildren look at me someday and say, you guys knew? What did you do? And so, yeah, I'm getting my marching shoes on.
Love that.
Okay, well, that's our podcast for this week. That's Earth Feels for this week. Thanks for listening in.
Get on your marching shoes, and we'll meet you next Friday.
Bye-bye.
All right, so I'm going to stop recording.